The war between the Harrigans and the Stevensons came to an abrupt and violent end in the season finale of Ronan Bennett's MobLand, and the main players in the Harrigan crime organization entered a larger and more dangerous world. Harry Da Souza's masterstroke to put an end to the war with the Stevensons permanently was carried out with Conrad and Maeve in jail. Along the way, a number of important mysteries surrounding the inner circle of the Harrigans were resolved, most notably the identity of the rat that had been providing Richie with intelligence for months. In other scenes, Kevin asserts his claim to the throne of the Harrigan criminal empire, refocused by the exorcism of his longtime tormentor, the prison guard Alan Rusby. After establishing that Eddie was, in fact, Conrad's son with his wife, Bella, Kevin disowned Eddie completely, labeling him Conrad's problem rather than his own. Harry used Richie's faith in the Harrigans' own lawyer, O'Hara Delaney, to set up the South London crime boss and all his soldiers, allowing Harry, Kevin, Paul, Zoja, and Kiko to kill them all in the ambush. Even though the battle with the Stevensons was resolved and many of the mysteries of MobLand's first season were resolved, the finale did a lot to set up an unconfirmed second season. In contrast to the London-based territories they shared with the Stevensons, the events of Season 1 unintentionally drew the Harrigans into a much larger criminal underworld. The members of the Harrigan crime organization, as well as the next group of adversaries whose anger has been aroused, have a lot of stories to tell in the next stage of their development. The last scene in MobLand Season 1 was far more personal than the large action set pieces that dominated the middle parts of the last episode. It featured Harry going back to Jan in the safe house, where she finally let loose her anger, fear, and frustration at being stuck in their current dangerous lifestyle with Gina. In her frustration, Jan made a slight Freudian slip and unintentionally stabbed Harry in the chest with a kitchen knife. The cliffhanger is probably a preemptive setup in case Tom Hardy doesn't or can't return for another season of MobLand, and they now have an easy way to write him off the show, giving Joe and Froggett's Jan a conflict to work through. Given his prominence in the show and his cool-headed and collected response to the stabbing, he is almost certainly not going to die from his wound, although technically his fate is left uncertain. As Conrad 100 Guns Harrigan, he was once the most feared crime lord in London and surely gained the respect and admiration of criminals throughout the city. Now being imprisoned alongside the other inmates, Conrad is praised for his decades of notorious malevolence. At the very end of the episode, Conrad leaves his prison cell and is greeted by the other inmates, who cheer and applaud him, which Conrad completely absorbs because, as has been made clear on multiple occasions, he is obsessed with his own reputation. As Conrad 100 Guns Harrigan, he was once the most feared crime lord in London and surely gained the respect and admiration of criminals throughout the city. However, now that he is in prison with the other inmates, Conrad is surrounded by their cheers and applause, which he thoroughly absorbs because, as has been made clear on multiple occasions, he cares about his own reputation above all else. To be honest, the explanation for Maeve's constant plotting is a little tenuous and almost seems to have been invented on the spot. But when she and Conrad discuss the burners they smuggled into their prison cells, Maeve says that everything she did, whether it was calling the police anonymously to put them on Harry's trail, giving Richie Stevenson the location of Serafina, or sicking Eddie on Tommy Stevenson and starting a war, was part of her own personal test. In other words, Maeve wanted to determine which family members were valuable enough to be the foundation of the future. Additionally, the finale gives much-needed background on why Maeve detested Serafina and was so attached to Eddie. Maeve fell in love with Eddie before he was even a teenager, even though she always knew he wasn't her grandson. In essence, she has been preparing him to be the heir to the Harrigan Empire, which is her top priority. In order to continue ruling vicariously now that Eddie is in charge, Maeve also plans to become the queen of his realm, something that would not have been feasible with an adult Serafina at the head of the table. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more videos.